Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's dive right in. Because today, we're looking at a truly fascinating lecture from November of 1993, titled The Challenge of Enlightenment. And what makes this so incredibly compelling is how it takes ancient, foundational Buddhist thought and turns it into a highly practical scaffold for modern life. We're not just talking about abstract philosophy here. It's literally a direct, step-by-step guide to decoding the human condition. So, think about this for a second. Why do we always feel unfulfilled no matter what we actually achieve? You know the feeling, right? You finally land that big promotion, you buy the dream car, you meet the perfect person, but eventually, inevitably, that nagging feeling of wanting more just creeps right back in. Well, the 1993 lecture we're analyzing today diagnoses this exact feeling. It presents a 2,500-year-old framework to explain exactly why our minds do this, and more importantly, how we can break the cycle. Here's how we're going to break it all down today. We'll start with the universal problem of suffering, discover the middle way, unpack the Four Noble Truths, break down the 8 inevitable sufferings, and finally, learn how to actually overcome the mental poisons. All right, jumping right into Section 1, the problem of suffering as a universal condition. What's really fascinating here is how the source material completely redefines a word we use all the time. In this framework, the concept of suffering, or ku, is not just about having a toothache, breaking a bone, or enduring physical pain. It defines suffering specifically as the universal state of experiencing unfulfilled desires. It's that constant low-level friction you feel when the reality of your life doesn't perfectly align with exactly what you want. And honestly, this condition is completely universal because we all hold on to these ideals. I mean, if we're smart, we wish we were a little smarter. If we have money, we kind of wish we had more. Even if someone appears to have this completely perfect, totally enviable life from the outside, internally, they still harbor unfulfilled desires. It is just a fundamental part of being human. Okay, moving on to Section 2, the middle way and discovering balance. To really understand the solution here, we have to look back at Siddhartha Gautama's historical search for enlightenment. At age 29, he actually renounces his incredibly comfortable life as a prince, and for 6 intense years, he engages in extreme ascetic practices. We're talking severe fasting, enduring intense physical pain, basically pushing himself to the brink of death. But ultimately, he abandons those extremes and discovers what is now called the middle way. This perfectly illustrates the contrast he found, because neither extreme actually works. Extreme asceticism, like literally starving yourself, just harms the body. In fact, the lecture points out that a physically exhausted, clouded mind actually blocks high-level spiritual communication. On the flip side of that, living a completely lazy, indulgent lifestyle just sitting on the couch yields absolutely zero spiritual growth. So neither starvation nor total laziness is going to lead to true understanding. Which brings us to the actual solution, the middle way. Essentially, this means maintaining peace of mind and spiritual concentration within a moderate, disciplined life. You need just enough discipline to keep yourself grounded, but also enough physical well-being to allow for deep, sustained spiritual focus. It was really only by adopting this balanced, moderate life that true enlightenment became possible for him. Now for Section 3, the Four Noble Truths, also known as the first turning of the Wheel of Dharma. I absolutely love this next part because it uses such a highly relatable analogy. The Four Noble Truths aren't just some abstract, mystical poetry. They actually act as a clinical, step-by-step diagnostic tool. According to the text, treating life suffering is exactly like diagnosing and treating a common cold. Let's see how this builds into a practical process for modern life. Just like treating a cold, there are 4 simple steps. First, acknowledge the symptom. You have a cold, or in life, you are experiencing suffering. Second, find the root cause. Did you walk outside in the freezing rain without a coat? Or what specific unfulfilled desire is causing your emotional pain? Third, visualize the cure. Imagine being totally healthy and the peace that brings. And fourth, apply the treatment. For a cold, you take medicine. For life suffering, you practice the Eightfold Path. It is a wonderfully logical, step-by-step method for personal problem solving. Which brings us to Section 4, the 8 sufferings. Time to agitate the problem a little bit. So to use that diagnostic tool we just talked about, we first have to look at the 4 fundamental sufferings: birth, aging, disease, and death. And what's super fascinating here is the text's interpretation of birth. It's not just viewed as this joyful arrival, it's actually framed as an intense fear. It's a constrained, somewhat scary transition from a free spirit world into a heavy physical body. Then we have aging, where the gradual loss of physical control causes deep frustration. disease, which is just the inevitable disharmony of the body, and death, our ultimate instinctual fear of the unknown. But, of course, it doesn't stop at just the physical inevitabilities. We also have 4 social and internal sufferings. There's parting, which is the pain of separation from the people we love. Meeting, which is that very distinct misery of being forced to interact with people we absolutely can't stand. We've all been there, right? Then there's unfulfilled desires, constantly craving things we just cannot have, and burning passions, being tormented by uncontrollable worldly urges. These 4 really show how our daily social interactions constantly generate friction in our lives. And you can take these ancient concepts and fit them right into the modern living room. For the pain of parting, the lecture actually points to the 90s cultural phenomenon of the Norita divorce, which is when couples would literally separate the exact moment they return to the airport from their honeymoon. For meeting, it's clashing with a difficult mother-in-law or having to deal with an angry boss every single day. For unfulfilled desires, it's missing out on that big promotion. These aren't abstract ideas. They are deeply relatable, everyday agitations. Let's look at how to fix it in Section 5, Mental Poisons and Overcoming Root Causes. So what is the ultimate root cause of the disease? It's a state called ignorance, or mumyo. But to be clear, this doesn't mean a lack of book smarts or education. It's a state where the mind is heavily clouded by worldly desires and mental poisons. Basically, our perspective gets completely warped, blinding us to the truth and causing us to suffer over things we really shouldn't be stressing about. The text outlines 5 specific mental poisons that cloud our minds like this. First up is greed, that endless, insatiable craving for more status or money. Second is anger, which typically flares up when reality doesn't meet our expectations. Third is foolishness, spending all your energy complaining about your circumstances instead of actually learning from them. Fourth is arrogance, which is intriguingly described here as a flipped inferiority complex. And fifth is doubt, cynically rejecting the truth or just constantly assuming the worst in others. Let's zoom in on just one of these poisons for a second: anger. An angry person often turns their own household into a daily battleground, making everyone around them totally miserable. But the crucial point here is the root cause. Chronic anger rarely comes from a place of pure strength. Instead, it almost always stems from unmet expectations, a lack of self-control, or deeply hidden inferiority complexes that just flare up defensively. So what is the structural cure to all of this? Well, to manage these mental poisons, we have to learn to view ourselves objectively, almost like a third party observing our own lives. We have to practice strict self-reflection to match our expectations to reality, making sure we aren't demanding the impossible from the world. And finally, we absolutely must build mental resilience through continuous learning, actively diluting these mental poisons with actual wisdom. The true beauty of this framework is how it takes these grand, massive philosophical concepts and turns them into a highly practical, everyday toolkit. So I'm going to leave you with this thought. Which unfulfilled desire is causing your suffering today? And how will you use this specific diagnostic framework to finally let it go? Remember, identifying the poison is always the first step to finding the cure. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.